So let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. A total box office was just shy of 88 million domestically, which constituted about a 37% drop. Which, is not great to see. But again, August, like I've been talking about, August is like that slower period, so it kind of makes sense because we're not really getting many big movies being released, so a lot of this box office is holdovers from the bigger films from the summer, right? In terms of stuff opening this weekend, we had the Zoe Kravitz written and directed thriller, if you will, called Blink Twice. Opened to about 7.3 million, which fell right in the middle of my projections of between 5 and 9. So, it was able to cross that kind of threshold there. But had, it's still not necessarily great to see. I haven't heard great reviews for it. I've recently just been recovering from COVID, so I haven't been able to go see a lot of stuff lately. From my understanding, the reviews have been fine, not bad, but not necessarily super stellar. So this is a little concerning if you're Zoe Kravitz, because if you look here at the right side of this chart, so far its total worldwide box office is only around 14 million. But it was made for about 20, which itself was already cheap, right? So it's not like it had this bloated budget. Like we'll see with another film that opened this weekend. But as you can see, right now it's a negative % return, right? So if it could have the legs and the momentum to, kind of be like a consistent performer every weekend, that would be fine. But again, the word of mouth has not been particularly great, so I'd be surprised if this ends up, being a box office juggernaut, if you will. Also opening this weekend was The Forge, which I believe was like a Christian film. I'm gonna double check this. I believe it was distributed by Affirm Films, which is like that, kind of family, a Christian film studio, right? The premise of this is, after graduating from high school without any plans for the future, Isaiah receives a push to start making better life decisions. Interesting. Okay. So, this did not open super big, obviously, only brought in about 6.6 million. That's also its worldwide total, but it was only made for 5 million. So it's already kind of crossed that initial threshold. Now, if it can get to 10, I would consider a success. But again, unless this has like a big overseas market that's about to open up, I think this one is also going to be a dud. But talk about more than a dud. We got another big bomb. August always seems to have one big, well, I say one, but we've already had Borderlands, but it looks like August is giving us 2 big bombs. So opening at number 8 is The Crow remake with one of the Skarsgård children, only bringing in about 4.6 million, even falling short of its very low projections of 6 to 10, right? And that is both its domestic and worldwide total so far, off of a $50 million budget, right? So that is not good, right? Right now it's a negative 90%. I don't think there's ever been a movie that opened at a negative 90% return and was able to become profitable later, short of like re-releases over years and decades. So, that's, if you're the filmmakers of The Crow, that's a little disappointing to see, but also I feel like I've seen nothing from this movie, but also a bunch. Like recently, feels like it was like a recent blitz on like Hulu. Like every other ad was for The Crow, but it was like this like past week or 2 weeks, right? So, and on top of it, not really getting very good reviews at all. With Blink Twice, we said they weren't great reviews, but this was like actively negative reviews. So, I'm gonna officially label this a box office bomb. Continuing into the second weekend, we have Alien Romulus bringing in, dropping from first to second, now in its second frame, bringing in just a little more than 16 million for the weekend. But it was a pretty big drop. It was about 61% drop, which is short. I wouldn't say it's catastrophic, but it's one level below, right? Especially in its second weekend. That must mean, and which is surprising because it's gotten some pretty decent reviews, it seems. So I'm not sure what's going on there, probably because I was supposed to go see it, but then I had COVID, so I had to cancel. That's probably their answer, right? It actually even added a couple theaters too, it looks like. So, I don't know what's going on with this movie. But despite that, it's still so far going to be at least moderate success, right? So it's brought in about 73-ish million domestically and 225 million worldwide. So that's a big jump. If you look at last weekend, it had about 108 million worldwide. So it more than doubled its worldwide budget in a week. So it must have either been doing really well overseas or maybe some new overseas markets opened up. But again, this was just off of an $80 million budget. So as you see over there, my percent return column, it's in the green. So at this point, I would say it's a moderate success. Now, despite having such a big drop, it's still in the top 5. I mean, it's top 2. It's number 2. So if it can keep kind of that momentum going, it could become even more than just a moderate success, right? Also continuing this weekend, we have the Coraline re-release. It was this is like at this point, when did that come out? I think like 2009, 2010. It's dropped from 5th to 7th in its second frame, bringing just a little more than 5 million for the weekend. About a just under 50% drop. But again, and this was kind of my point last week, but I know a lot of you aren't necessarily watching week to week, so I'll reiterate it, that the fact that a 15-ish year old movie is being re-released and is making it 2 weeks in a row in the top 10 speaks to kind of the state, not necessarily the state of the box office, but more so the state of audience appetite. That if you put these movies that people love back in theaters, they will show up, even if it's available to them, right? You're not going to be able to make huge money, and that's why the whole theatrical versus streaming debate that we had in COVID was really dumb, because you're never going to get normal people. You're never going to get enough people to just rent it or watch it on streaming to make up for the money you're going to lose by not doing it theatrically. But in this case, just to kind of have a little extra cash come in, this is $5 million that they didn't have before, and it made about 8 last week, so it's made about an extra 13 million. And all parties involved, it's still being able to bring in some money. So, looking at the film's total box office take, including its original releases and subsequent re-releases, this brings Coraline's domestic total to about 107 million, and its worldwide total to about 162 million, just off of a $60 million budget. So, obviously this is not a new movie, but that's an extra $13 million that keeps adding to that percent return, which is close to about 170%. Let's see, what else? So in the top 5, we still have Deadpool and Wolverine. Interesting, it had held first place for 3 weekends, dropped to second, but because Alien Romulus, which opened first last week, because Alien Romulus had such a big drop, Deadpool is now number 1 again, right? So it brought in just a little more than 18 million, just a 39% drop. Again, 18 million is just a drop in the bucket of what it's made, but again, that's $18 million they didn't have. So it's this kind of, it's all about momentum. Hollywood has really transitioned into being super, super focused on the big openings, because that's good for headlines. And also, if your movie's not great, it's better to front load it so that as word of mouth spreads that's not very good, you're not going to get a lot of people. So you want to get as many people in on that first weekend. But really, that's not sustainable, right? So having a movie that could just keep performing and performing week after week is really valuable. And for a movie that's been in the top 10 for about 5 weekends now, it's a fairly old quote-unquote film. It did have the highest per theater average at for about 4,700 per theater, beating out all these newer movies. This brings its domestic total to about 577 million, and its worldwide total to 1.2-ish billion. So definitely a big success for Marvel. But again, the question will they be able to sustain that into other non-Fox Deadpool Marvel movies, right? Also still in the top 5 here, we have It Ends With Us, the semi-controversial adaptation of the Colleen Hoover novel, which itself was semi-controversial. Holding its third place spot in its third frame, bringing in just under 12 million, a 50% drop. So not great, but again, it is in its third weekend. You're going to see that. And even added about 100 theaters. So despite the controversy, again, this is hugely successful for everyone involved, right? Because if you look at the totals here, 121-ish million domestically, 243 million worldwide, off of just a $25 million budget, right? So we got, an 870% return. So, maybe I think a lot of Hollywood executives are going to look at the success of this and go, we need to greenlight more movies based off of not just books, not just popular books, but semi-polarizing books, because that can generate a lot of interest, right? And it ends up being free publicity if you're a cynical business executive, right? Just a couple other notes here. We have at 9 and 10, two films that really were big performers for the summer. We have Despicable Me 4 dropping from 6th to 9th in its 8th frame, bringing just 4.4 million, about a 30% drop. But this brings its worldwide total to 885 million off of a $100 million budget. So very good percent return, very good for Illumination, for the Minions, Despicable Me franchise, good for Universal, which of course is the parent company of all this. And then the big moneymaker, right? The big highest grossing movie of the year so far, Inside Out 2, dropping from 8th to 10th in its 11th frame. This movie's been out for almost 3 months now, and is still bringing in, seven-figure return, 7 figures every weekend for domestic. It did have the lowest per theater average, despite having it's not really in many theaters at this point. It's only in about 1,500 theaters, but it's still considered wide. But again, at this point, it's just about every little extra sprinkle on the cake, right? Because this brings its domestic total to 646 million, like its worldwide total to 1.6 billion. Off of a $200 million budget. So this has definitely been the summer, for better or for worse, of, hey, Hollywood, just make sequels of movies that people already like, and they will make a shit ton of money. I think where Marvel got into trouble was assuming that being part of this shared universe was enough. And I think audiences, they want to see the continuation of Inside Out. They want to see Deadpool's next chapter. Whereas no one really cares about the random MCU movie, because even though it's technically it's not quite a sequel, it's just another kind of installment in a larger universe that is obviously connected, but not necessarily always ping-ponging off of one another. So, again, I think that is potentially damaging, right? Because, again, it incentivizes Hollywood to just be really conservative. I don't mean politically, but just in terms of, being very safe in terms of the movies that it decides to make. But in any case, I think that is the lesson if you're a Hollywood executive here. And also, we still have Twisters. We almost moved on, and I wanted to mention Twisters here. Dropped from 4th to 6th, and it's 6th frame, though. So this has been out for about a month and a half. Brought in about 6.2 million for the weekend. It's so close to crossing that second threshold, right? You want to double your budget to account for the marketing costs. And right now it's at about 347 million worldwide off of a $175-ish million budget. 97% return. We want to get to 100. It's so close. And I think because it's not at the very bottom of the top 10, I think by next week we're going to see it finally, that little yellow square, the little yellow rectangle over on the right, it's going to turn green. Fingers crossed. Again, not a great movie, but a really fun movie. Perfect kind of popcorn, summery, blockbustery fun.